which we were able to thoroughly instrument, analyze, and document, about the size of the original Sony Walkman tape recorder. And this is the device that was used on Peter Townshend when he was flown in on almost a hospital bed type airplane to the John Wayne Airport. He'd taken a massive dose of heroin before he left London, enough to get him to the States. He was absolutely green and yellow when they took him off the plane, and Meg put this device on his head, and within about 40 minutes, of course, all of you have read this story. It's been reprinted in Penthouse. It's been reprinted in Omni magazine. He was rehabilitated after having spent a fortune in various clinics around the world. Peter Townshend finally got off, kicked the habit, and is now happy, healthy, clean, producing again. All of this is history. At any rate, they were getting results with the device, as primitive as it was. And it began to appear that the neuroelectric therapy group, the magnet group, either was not going to produce anything, they were either unable or unwilling to do it. Now this could lead to a great deal of speculation as to who got to whom, whether the mafia was involved or some of the pharmaceutical houses or what have you. So I decided, well, let's research this thing a little bit further and bring out a box that will do some good, which I did. I gave away a number of these to friends and used them as guinea pigs. It worked. We feel vastly superior to the $50,000 Pharmacon device. But now, another very interesting thing happened. There had been an ongoing debate between Dr. Robert O. Becker, who was chief of orthopedic surgery at the Syracuse VA hospital, and a student of his, Dr. Andy Bassett, Columbia University, as to which frequencies would rehabilitate, rejuvenate, and grow limbs back on amputated mammals. How many of you are familiar with Robert O. Becker's work? Okay. Becker was using actually attached electrodes and putting current directly into the system. Now, he and I have shared several conferences in Canada over the years. He's a brilliant man. He's rather bitter. At one time, he'd been nominated for the Nobel Prize for his work, but because he was a little bit outspoken, like some of the rest of our family, he got to enjoy a rather early retirement. He was also speaking out on the fact that the power lines were causing undue clusters of illness here in the eastern United States. But he had a student named Andy Bassett who has made millions of dollars on a device which has been accepted by the orthopedic mainstream ethical physicians, a little magnetic paddle which is put near the non-union fracture, which induces a current into that area by induction. Now here we have two separate approaches. We have a little ongoing discussion like Dr. Salk and Dr. Sabin. You can't get around either one of them without having him absolutely assassinate the other one, although both of them have a vaccine that works to a degree. This discussion became so heated that some funds were laundered and sent to Great Britain to find out just what was really going on. The results of this were reported for the first time publicly at a conference in Quebec last year by the principal investigator from Cambridge, a person of female persuasion, by the way, who finally located the secret frequency that was causing the tissue to rejuvenate. The mechanism by which this happened was that some of the blood cells, the basophiles, in going to a site which had been slightly abraded, in the case of a rat, they would amputate an extremity, put the electrode, the blood seepage would undifferentiate, go to the area and start growing the tissue which had been there originally, as though there had been some type of an architectural pattern that had restored the memory of the RNA DNA close to the site to reproduce the proper tissue. It didn't turn into kidney tissue or brain tissue or testicles. It turned into whatever happened to have been there before the amputation. Now,
did that go down just to the joint?
No, they have had absolute, they've had, in human beings, young children, they have grown fingers back. If you follow this, it's an extremely delicate subject because they're not supposed to be doing this with human subjects. But when they get off the conference, they'll talk to you about what has actually been going on with this. Now, they ran many, many, many animal studies. They held the frequency constant and varied the waveform. They held the voltage constant and varied the frequency. They held the voltage and frequency constant and varied the pulse repetition rate. One of the three magic numbers was publicly disclosed at this conference a year ago last August in Canada. It was very much unsuspected. It was over 2 kilohertz. I can give it to this group, 2.72 kilohertz. When that particular frequency was in the shotgun effect of the device, the limb regrew. When it was filtered out, or when the slope of the curve was altered so that that frequency was not predominant, it didn't grow. Now, there are 3 other magic numbers which cause the rejuvenation, the healing, rapid restimulation of the neurotransmitters, and these were developed on another government grant program, and I'm not at liberty to tell you what they are, but they are in the little box that we built. We did very elaborate spectrum analysis work on all of the units that we could beg, borrow, or steal. These are computer printouts, spectrum analysis sheets of over 24 brain tuners, acuscopes, acustims, myomatics, the Great Wall device from China, the Shackman instrument device, the Pharmacon unit from England. We could go down the list on and on and on and on. We found that the majority of these devices were sort of hit or miss. They didn't have the magic numbers, but they had enough fairly rough harmonics. You know, it's so ridiculous for the people selling these devices to claim certain frequency effects. How many engineers do we have here? Well, you've played around with radio. Frequency is a useful term only if you're dealing with coherent waveforms, such as a sine wave. If you have a square wave, by definition, a square wave has an infinite number of odd harmonics, right? That's what a square wave is. So that means if you put a 10 hertz square wave into somebody, you have every other odd harmonic of that from DC to light if it passes the system. Is that correct? So here are people putting out square wave boxes that they say will tune from X number of hertz to X number of hertz, and they're looking at the pulse repetition rates and confusing them with the frequencies. Now, these are things that we find absolutely abhorrent. But since all these devices were copied from Tom Wing's Myomatic of many years ago, the spin-off of the Myomatic was the Acuscope. The spin-off of the Acuscope was the Acustim. This apocrypha continues to repeat itself over and over in the trade. Well, we hope that in these years where more and more people are talking about electronic medicine, which has to be the medicine of the future, that some of these basic misconceptions will be clarified. Well, at any rate, 5 months after Paul had said, why don't you meet Meg and find out if there's anything we can do to speed this up? By the way, Meg's reason for not accepting the government's offer was that she wanted an entirely new category, and Paul had conveyed to her that if you will come in under the grandfather clause, get you approval by the FDA which will permit human and animal experimentation. And Meg absolutely totally refused to do this. She wanted a new category for neuroelectric therapy, not realizing that this category had been preempted by CES, which is cranial electrostimulation, and a long list of other generic terms. We tried to explain to Meg that since Reagan, there are only under 300 investigators still working for the Food and Drug Administration, and this is an accurate figure. There are over 80,000 devices awaiting their investigation and approval. If you have another $5 to $6 million and 10 years to wait, Even if we get you at the front of the list, it's not going to fly. But she absolutely insisted that she would not come in under the grandfather clause for a TENS unit, which incidentally is how you people are legal, and the Accuscope is legal. Although these devices do a great deal more than any TENS unit, they cannot make claims for what they actually do because this would put them in a new category. And this means human and animal tests, certification, all of this research that goes on and on and on and takes a tremendous amount of money. So we began experimenting in earnest. Thank God I had access to a IQS Model 401IL spectrum analyzer, which is probably the most advanced thing that I could get my hands on for under $50,000 for that Hewlett-Packard. And then we began looking at these frequencies in earnest. We eliminated the need for ever tuning the device. How many of you are familiar with the Accuscope? I'm going to use this as an example.